Today I'm just going to describe this experiment that I've run for the last 4 months using heat mats and growing lights. So in a basement in my house, what I did was I got these metal, aluminium cooking trays. I put them on these 20-degree heat mats and I used 2 heat of these good quality LED growing lights per tray, and I decided to run a bunch of experiments with that. So this is in the middle of April. This first one here is Australian Violet, which I picked out of the ground and just put in this to see in some soil to see how it would go. The next is the Knobby club rush, which I decided to opt for the bog method again, which I'd successfully used before. And then the third was the coast tea tree, which I just put with some native soil mix and perlite, and I was going to see what would happen over winter. First thing to happen was that the Australian Violet died. I just pulled that out of the ground and put it in soil. It didn't appreciate it at all. So I replaced it a week later with some purple Coral Pea, the Hardenbergia, and I'd had success with that too over summer and spring, and decided to see how that would go. The Ficinia, it sprouted almost immediately because it was a really good end to spring, and I was quite hopeful. Coast tea tree did absolutely nothing. It sprouted a few little things here, and I was quite hopeful for that. And as you'll see, it did not eventuate the way that I thought it would. So noting that the water was quite cold from the tap, I'm not sure that the heat really got to it. So then the Hardenbergia, a couple of them sprouted quite quickly, so I planted them out. The Knobby club rush then started stalling once the heat started going down, and the coast tea tree I realised were just weeds. Given the low success with the coast tea tree, in a bold move, 1 month later, in the middle of May, I decided to spread prickly tea tree, the Leptospermum Continentale, across the seed tray to see if that would do something different instead of just waiting. And yep, so we'll see how that goes in a little bit. I decided to dry out the Ficinia to see if that would do anything, because it didn't look like it was sprouting anymore. The Hardenbergia had seemed to have given up, so in the third one I decided to use these Silver Princess and Crimson Bottlebrush seeds, which I had bought and had low success rate before. So go forward 2 months, and the coast tea tree and Leptospermum Continentale, the prickly tea tree, indistinguishable but sprouting quite well. These were particularly the prickly tea tree I'd picked myself, so they were doing okay. So I was pretty happy with that. I can't distinguish them. One of them's got a red stem, the other one is quite bushy. We'll soon find out what they are. In where I'd put the Silver Princess and the Crimson Bottlebrush, the Crimson Bottlebrush just did this and did nothing else, and a Hardenbergia sprouted. So my impatience with the Hardenbergia was punished. So in the end, the Australian Violet, the purple Coral Pea, the Silver Princess and the Crimson Bottlebushes were all failures. This is all I got from the Knobby club rush. This is, I think, the prickly tea tree, but we'll have to see. And I believe this one here, it is one root ball. I think that's the coast tea tree, but we're going to have to see till they get bigger which one is which. And what were the other learnings from it? I think that the issues were the fact that the aluminium tray was not in full contact with the mat. Now, I didn't want to put the pots in direct contact with the heating mat because I didn't want it to just get consistently wet. I think maybe the cooling effect of the cold water had something to do with it. I also think one of the big issues was the cold room, like being in the basement and not being a consistent heat. So you may have had some heat from the bottom, but all this really cold heat from the top and sides. It also showed the difference in having fresh seeds, because the only ones that worked were the ones that I picked myself. And yeah, the soil just generally felt colder than in the greenhouse. So I really think that for this to work, you would need a controlled environment. After the Hardenbergia, Australian Violet, Crimson Bottlebrush, and Silver Princess experiment failed, what I decided to do was to try my luck with some cuttings on the heat mat. So I put one of these plastic tubs on top of it. I put Attriplex, Coastal Rosemary, and Correa in it, and I put it on top. And at the start I was very excited because it looked like it had created a humid dome, which is what cuttings really like. But I soon realized, as you're going to see later, is that it actually was acting like a wet forest. It wasn't consistently humid like it likes. And in fact, this thing would have been better outside getting the winter sun rather than under this. It did nothing. Also, the season for selecting a lot of these cuttings was off, and effectively they all died and nothing worked. So it was a failure, and I tried to move them outside to salvage them, but it was too late and everything died. So yeah, this doesn't work, so don't bother trying. The last experiment I tried with the grow lights was to chuck these saplings on the same tray to see if the consistent heat and light would do anything. So first is one coast Banksia, there's a Hedge Salt-Bush, a weeping lily pilly, a Seaberry Saltbush, a Leptospermum Continentale, and a Hardenbergia. So I tried to give them the consistent heat and water them from the bottom and see what would happen in comparison to being outside or in the greenhouse. And effectively there was no difference for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm probably going to abandon the experiment. Those are the ones outside. That's the one under the growing lights and heat mat. This is the Seaberry Saltbush growing mat versus outside. In the greenhouse, absolutely no difference. And there was no difference with the Banksia either. So probably going to abandon this experiment too.